Hi everyone, welcome to the instructor video on characterization. Characterization refers to the techniques an author employs to represent the nature or natures of a character. That might seem like a simple definition, but characterization can be a complicated process, largely because each character can contain a multitude of potentially contradictory moral, intellectual, and emotional natures. Fictional characters can be flat, otherwise referred to as static, or round, otherwise referred to as dynamic. Fictional characters can also function as major or minor characters, depending on their roles in the text. But be careful here. Just because a character is minor does not mean their role is unimportant. In fact, minor characters can play very important roles in fiction. Because most plots reveal the feelings, motives, and values of a story's characters, there are several important and recurring roles that characters can play. For example, you'll often find protagonists, that is, main characters, such as a hero, heroine, or anti-hero, antagonists, or characters who oppose the protagonist, sometimes referred to as the villain, but not always. And you can also find foils. Foils are characters who differ from the protagonist, but there's something about them that teases out certain qualities in the protagonist. Protagonists and foils are not necessarily at odds like protagonists and antagonists are. Rather, they're complementary in some ways, and their complements help further the plot. Let's look at a few examples of techniques that authors can employ for characterization. The most important techniques for characterization are also elements of narration, and the three I want to focus on today are point of view, showing versus telling, and dialogue. We've already discussed point of view a little bit. However, there are a few more guiding questions that can help you understand how point of view informs characterization. For example, what does the narrator know about a character? Throughout their narration, do they reveal all that they know, or do they only reveal part of what they know? And like we've talked about before, is that narrator reliable or sincere? Can you trust them? Characterization can also be informed by narrative techniques such as showing versus telling. In order to determine which technique is at work here, ask yourself this question. Does the narrator present characters' words and actions without comment, which is what we call showing, or do they describe and comment on those words and actions? This is what we call telling. It's also important to pay attention to the dialogue in fiction. What are characters saying? Do they reveal anything about their motives, feelings, values, and relationships? Or the motives, feelings, values, and relationships that belong to other people, or do they keep that information hidden? And just like with point of view, we have to consider whether or not they're lying or telling the truth when they speak. To practice using some of these ideas in guiding questions, here's an example pulled from A Good Neighborhood. On page 63, the narrator explains that Brad had started the company, his HVAC company, with less than nothing. $4,000 of debt, which he'd accumulated by taking a bunch of college courses he had little use for. Philosophy, psychology, sociology, English, very basic science and math. What was he meant to do with the stuff they were teaching in these classes? And on that same page, Brad mentions to Juniper, I was too smart for college, and honestly, honey, I think you're too smart too. There's no reason for you to go off to Washington or wherever. Nothing you learned there is going to be practical for your future. Now let's take a step back and consider what these passages reveal about Brad's characterization. In the first passage, the collective narrator describes, that is, shows the reader, Brad's brief educational background. In this passage, they relay facts without much flair, and they convey information that is largely sympathetic to Brad's values and desires. You'll notice, too, that they pose a rhetorical question, but they don't answer it for the reader. They leave it up to the reader to decide. Additionally, in Brad's comment to Juniper about the presumed worthlessness of college, the text demonstrates to the reader Again, showing the reader, this time through dialogue, that he is a hyper-confident and perhaps we might say a little arrogant as well man who does not see the value in his stepdaughters pursuing an education. In both instances, we can consider these passages to be microcosms of Brad's characterization. These are small examples, to be sure, but they build on each other to create a full picture of Brad. Sometimes characterization can be obvious, but other times it can be less obvious, and you'll need to rely on your new close reading skills to be on the lookout for characterization clues. We'll be practicing these skills throughout our semester, and it does feel a little bit more natural over time. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and please email me if you have any questions.